Welcome back to class, you delinquent students that are not here on time. And so I've got Professor Heath with me. We've got the professor right here, and we are ready to school you guys a little bit more today. Professor Heath, what are we talking about today?
Today we're talking about the different types of budgets, right? So we're taking, I want to say we're taking the last 3 conversations we've had and really putting the nuts and bolts together. Like, so moving away from why you should budget to, okay, what are the types of budgets? How do you actually get started? What are the nuts and bolts? What are the different types of budgets for different types of people? So we're just going to go. I want to say it's probably going to be less entertaining, but hopefully much more informative. So, yeah, the types of budgets today.
Less entertaining with us, man. Come on, that's not freaking possible. Impossible. We getting started with budgets. I mean, we went through, trying to help everyone see, guys, you can do this. There's a reason you should do this. But yeah, today, this is where I'm like, yeah, dude, budgets. Let's talk about budgets. And then I suddenly get, budgeting's awesome. But then I get into the nuts and bolts, which like a lot of people, and it gets overwhelming. So, I was like, there was a couple types of budgets that crushed me that I had a hard time with. And I know we're going to talk about 1 or 2 of them today. So I'm super excited. Now, where do we start? Getting started with budgets. What are some of the most important things right in the beginning?
So I definitely have a list of things that we want to do, but I may want to start with, my daughter called me literally last week and was like, "Hey, Dad," so she lives in Chicago. We send her an allowance. She's going to college. And she was like, "Hey, what is the right amount of money that I should be setting aside for food?" Right? Simple question. And she's like, "I want to start budgeting and I want to just know how much I should start, spending on food." And that question is literally impossible to answer, right? So for me, the money that I spend on food is going to be totally different than the money that she spends on food. So I couldn't answer the question for her. I said, well, listen, what I would do is just go to ChatGPT and figure out what a single college student living in Evanston, Illinois should spend on food per week, and just start there. And then what you want to do is you just want to say, okay, let's say ChatGPT tells you that you should be spending $80 on food a week. Then what you want to do is just like be intentional about the way that you're spending money on food during the week and try to spend only $80. And then at the end of the week, reflect on that, right? So you want to say like, okay, was that really hard? Was it really difficult to stay, was I eating top ramen for breakfast and lunch and dinner, or was it really easy and I had much more flexibility? And what you want to do, or what I was encouraging my daughter to do, was just to iterate down to the right amount of money that she should be spending on food. And it's not necessarily you should be spending this. It's like you should get to a point where it makes sense for you. And so the whole point about budgeting isn't so much that we want to be like lost in the weeds every day or every week, but we just want to like iterate to something that makes a lot of sense. And so like in my mind, all the different types of budgets that we're going to start talking about, I would think the most important thing is we don't want to get lost in the weeds. What we really want to do is iterate to something that makes perfect sense for us. And so that we're just not blindly going through the motions and mindlessly spending money. And we want to iterate to like the ideal spot. And then once we kind of iterate to an ideal spot, hopefully we don't have to pay attention to things as much as we do in the beginning. So like, to me, that's the high overview, is that there really is no right number. There isn't a right approach. It's just, we want to be intentional and we want to iterate to something that works for us in the long term. Right. So,
well, that's awesome, because it is personal. And one of the things too is like when one of my friends came to me recently, actually it was a coworker of mine, and they were like, Sean, I see your podcast can I pick your brain a little bit? I was like, well, I don't know if you're picking the brain of the right person, but I'll talk to you and share what people are telling me. And he said, well, I try to figure out where my money's going. And that was one of his biggest problems. He doesn't even know where his money's going. And he was talking about how, and I was like, well, how are you buying things? He's like, well, I use my bank transfer cash app. I have cash. I have 3 different cards that I use, and like he's like, I keep track of this one, but I don't know about this one, and then I got this one over here, and it's like I've got all these things, and like money's coming out from everywhere, and I was like, well, I think that I had remembered someone telling me something about that's not what you should do. So what should we be doing instead?
So again, like if that system works for that individual, then we shouldn't tell that individual not to do that. But for me, and what I would encourage most of us to try to do is to funnel all of your spending into like you use one card and one bank account. And you do that because it just becomes much easier to track things and to like really understand how much you're spending on each particular item. So when you're using, an American Express card for certain types of purchases and your ATM card, your debit card for other types of stuff, and you're just doing direct deposit or bill pay within your bank account, it gets really hard to keep track of it. My own personal finances are difficult. And I've been really intentional lately about like forcing myself to pay for everything with just one credit card. So I could really identify where my money specifically is going to. So right off the bat, I would really try to, just use one source of payment so that you can figure out where your money's going. And then if that doesn't really work for you, there's all sorts of apps that are available to us where we can funnel all of, cash is obviously probably difficult, but if we're using electronic payments, we could use apps that will like collect and culminate all of that information, and it'll summarize it for you. So look, you definitely have to get you definitely, that's step one, is really trying to identify how are you going to keep track of it. And so it's either an app or it's just using one credit card every month. And then obviously paying the credit card off at the end of the month, which we'll get into next week. But you want to start there. And then once you have a single source that you're using to spend your money, then it becomes easier to, put the different categories of where your money's going to. And the common ones are, maybe not everybody has all of these, but I would be surprised if somebody's got a category that doesn't fall in the following, right? So we're usually setting aside money for retirement or savings or general savings.
Yeah.
Then you got things like rent or mortgage, utilities, food.
Mhm.
And then with food, I would almost think about breaking that up into 2 categories. It would be, what you're buying at the grocery store as opposed to what you spend when you eat out. Because, again, those are 2 very different types of food purchases. So I generally break those out. Then you got transportation. It could be public transportation. It could be a car. It could be a car payment. It could be insurance on the car. But all of that would go into transportation. And then unfortunately, you've got debt. So then you would want to identify like credit card payments, student loan payments, car payments. And then everybody's going to have, some unfortunate categories at the bottom, which one is miscellaneous. It's just like if I go to Walgreens and I buy cough syrup, it's hard to understand what category that would fall into. So for me, I just have like a miscellaneous thing, and it's usually the same amount every month. It fluctuates, but it's some number on average at the end of the month. But then you have like big ones where you have unexpected items, right? So undoubtedly, when you start tracking your expenses and your spending, there's always going to be unexpected things. It doesn't matter who you are or what your situation is. you're going to have unexpected stuff, and they're never going to go away. There's never going to be a period in your life where something doesn't come up unexpected.
Yeah.
And then you have, finally, I would say the last category might just be insurance, right? So you may be paying health insurance, but that's the category of stuff. And again, I don't think we need to take notes, and I don't think that you have to force yourself to stick to my categories, but you want to come up with a set of categories that makes sense for you, so that you can then start measuring and identifying areas that you have control over. And then I think, again, as we are identifying areas where we want control, it's really like being intentional in the moment when we're spending. And then at the end of the month, reflecting on how it went. Right. So we could set a budget, or we could set an amount that we want to pay for food, and we could vastly over exceed maybe we'd say, hey, for this month, I only want to spend $850 on food. You get to the end of the month, you tried your best, but you ended up paying $1,200. Right at the end of the month, we're not going to kill ourselves because we spent much more on food than we anticipated. What we want to do is ask ourselves, like, okay, why did I spend more money on food than I anticipated? Is it because I underestimated how much food was going to cost me, or was it things that I did during the month that led to me spending more? And so moving forward, do I want to be more reasonable? Do I want to move the budget up from $850 to $1,200? Or do I want to be more intentional moving forward and really try to hit that $850? To me, that's the main thing about budgeting. We're not like in the process of like getting super emotional about how we do. What we really want to identify are areas of improvement and areas where we can be more intentional, or where we should be more reasonable in the way that we set our budget for the following month.
Yeah. It's really watching those trends, man. It's like, if you can see, what you're doing normally, whether it be, with work, with money, or like, say you're in the gym, you're like, well, last month I lifted this much. What am I lifting this much? If you don't get to the gym as many days, well, you're not going to be making you're not going to be making the sweet gains, man.
Yeah. I like it. Again, everything falls back to food for me. One of my nieces is in my class, and she sends my wife text. She's like, "Hey, Uncle Steve, like all he does is talk about food in class." And so anyway, that's a big secret. Awesome. But for me, like I went to the doctor last year. I was pre-diabetic. I had some terrible numbers, and I just went back just a few weeks ago, and my numbers are like substantially better than where they were. And again, it's just like, you're awesome. Totally right. Everything is relative, right? So we just want to make sure that we're moving in the right direction. We want to iterate to something really positive. And it's not so much about killing ourselves or beating ourselves up because we had pizza or ice cream for dinner the previous night. We just want to generally be making better choices as we move forward, right? So that's the overview.
I love it. Yeah, that's the starting point. You know what I mean? As we dive into them, this first budget that we're going to talk about is one that has always intimidated me. And I don't know why, and I'd love your take on it, but the zero-based budgeting, what is it? And why am I terrified of this budget? Like, I tried to use the apps that use zero-based budgeting, and it always was overwhelming for me. And maybe it's just my personality type, which is, again, what it comes back to. I'm on the second budget we talk about. That one makes so much more logical sense to me, and it's just more my personality style. But talk to me about zero-based budgeting. What is it, and how is it?
So zero-based budgeting is like, it's everything wrong for people who don't like budgeting. So if you think that this process is gonna stress you out, the last thing you want to do is start with zero-based budgeting. Okay, so zero-based budgeting is actually a concept that was created in corporate America back a long time ago. But at Texas Instruments, somebody started this idea of zero-based budgeting where they were saying, hey, listen, we're going to set a budget for the company and nobody's going to be spending any money unless they can justify like why we are spending money. So we're going to start with like your specific division is going to get $0. And you now need to tell me what it is you're going to spend money on and why it fits into the corporation's end game. So zero-based budgeting was designed for corporate America. However, it has definitively made its way into personal finance. And so it's a corporate America concept that we use in personal finance. And because of that, if you are coming to the table and you don't feel super confident about money, like it's the expert approach to budgeting. So it's not for everybody. I personally love zero-based budgeting because I'm a nerd that way and I like numbers. And so for me, it really makes sense. But what it is it's literally identify. So let's say we make $2,000 a month or $5,000, maybe 5,000 is more reasonable. Maybe we make $5,000 a month, but we're really allocating that $5,000 to each one of those categories that we just identified: food and transportation and mortgage and utilities, all entertainment, miscellaneous, one-time expenses. We're identifying specific categories for each dollar. And so it's really kind of like a ground up approach, super detailed approach to budgeting.
That's awesome. Well, and I know that I've read about this and I've heard that like people this was good for were like control freaks. Also, I heard that it was really good for debt pay down. But what are some other things that this could be really good for?
So it's good for aggressively saving. So you're right. It is really good for debt pay down. And again, we're paying attention to every specific dollar. So it really makes sense for us it allows us to identify areas of improvement so that we can take money maybe out of the food category and put it into paying down our credit cards. The more money I can take out of food or miscellaneous or entertainment, things that I have control over. I'm not saying that we need to punish ourselves, but I'm identifying areas of spending where I have control and moving that money from those categories to things that are like, big priorities. And so it's obviously credit card debt, maybe saving for retirement. It gives us a lot of opportunity to really iterate and identify, fine tune specific instances where we can maximize the spending and things that are super important to us.
And I know there's some great apps for this too. Like I believe YNAB and then EveryDollar are really commonly used for this.
You Need a Budget is the YNAB. And it's like ideal for zero-based budgeting. Unfortunately, it costs. It's like I think there's like a monthly fee. There might be a free version. I'm not the expert on apps, but I agree that for me personally, I did everything in Excel. So I downloaded all of the spending from my bank account. I put it in Excel, and so a lot of us, we may want to do zero-based budgeting, but we're not the best at Excel and downloading files from our bank accounts. So we could use the apps like YNAB and EveryDollar. I think Monarch Money is another good app. And our bank accounts, right? So I use Wells Fargo, and I have Wells Fargo identifies categories. And I can go in and say, okay, every time I go to Walgreens, let's make sure we put that in the miscellaneous budget. And every time I go to Safeway, let's make sure that ends up in the grocery budget. So we could use even our online banking tools that are available to us to start using that zero-based budget.
Well, the next budget that I wanted to dive into, and it's the one that I really enjoy. It logically makes sense to me, and I'm very artistic and visual. And I was like, this one I can grasp it. I'm a little dumb. And I mean, when it comes to these things, and it helps me because it's like 50, 30, 20. It makes sense, which is the 50, 30, 20 budget, which is, I believe, 50% needs, 30% wants, and then 20% savings and debt. And it's kind of easy to follow for beginners.
It's super easy. And that's why it was developed. So you may not know this, but Elizabeth Warren, the senator, I can't remember where she is located, but she's like ran for president recently. And her and her daughter wrote a book about finances and personal wealth. And she was the one who popularized the 50-30-20 budget. And so again, it's taking the concepts of zero-based budgeting and honestly, it's really just like shortening the list of categories that we're spending money on, right? So the zero-based budgeting, it's going to give you, or you have at least the opportunity to identify, between 10 and 15 specific line items that you're going to spend money on, and really keeping track of things in a detailed way. So 50-30-20 is just a step back and saying, hey, let's not get so overwhelmed with all the different categories of spending. Let's just triage some of the spending and let's put, again, let's just identify, a category, the 50, which are needs. And maybe you can reclassify needs as being like, maybe it's just fixed. Right. So our mortgage payment isn't really going to change month to month, or our rent payment isn't going to change from month to month. And we don't really have a whole lot of control over it. And it is something that we need. So let's just put it in one bucket and set it aside so it doesn't complicate things. Like that, it really isn't anything that from one month to another, I need to really focus on. And so let's just, let's take that. Transportation is something, food, obviously. And again, I would say it was the food grocery category that falls into that 50% need. Utilities probably goes into that bucket. And then you have this 30%, which is kind of wants. It's like, let's have some fun with the way that we spend our money. It shouldn't just be about, I shouldn't be only focused on making sure my needs are covered, but like I want to spend some money on things that really provide a lot of value to me, or I want to go to a concert. Like my wife and I love live music, and so we spend a lot of our money on that, and it's clearly a want. And so let's identify at least, within our range, 30% of our income should be allocated to things that we enjoy and we want to do. And then that last category is 20% to savings and retirement and so forth. And it's, it's obviously very, very important. But yeah, those are the three categories. And the goal, again, is to just make it less overwhelming. Let's just make something that we could, again, it's not going to intimidate us. It's going to allow us to create this opportunity to iterate. Remember, we're not really wanting to live with a budget for the rest of our lives, but we want to learn how to iterate to something that makes sense for us.
Definitely. Well, one of the things that that pops up, and one of the reasons I like this budget is because I taught kids for a long time, and trying to talk to kids, and because I think a lot of people haven't really evolved beyond that level in different ways of maturity, myself included. And right. And it's like, but when I talk about if I talk about, a zero-based budgeting to a kid, they're just looking at me like, dude, you're crazy. That's not happening right now. But if I talk about, 50-30-20 budget, I can get a kid that can tune into that can understand that. Like, okay, kiddo, this much we spend on the things we need to spend on. This much is for fun, and this much is for tomorrow, because we don't know if that money is going to be there tomorrow. And kids can get that. And so, I mean, my point with the kids is like, it's simple, and it's great for boundaries without really micromanaging. You can, I can't spend this from here because this is a need, this is going to have to stay in that category, and anything that's extra gets dumped out over there.
Yeah. It's almost what I use now. It's my finances.
Yeah.
Again, I don't want to say they've gotten too complicated, but there's so much brewing between. I no longer really worry about my day-to-day expenses too much. And so like I've moved away from the zero-based budgeting because it's just so hard for me to employ. But yeah, I do the 50, 30, 20 budget. And again, it's ideal for people who are starting off and not wanting to get too intimidated by spending.
I love that. Well, the next budget is a really interesting one. And this is one that you had mentioned first. Go ahead.
Before we move on from the 50, 30, 20, I think I want to.
Yeah.
So I don't think that we're giving license to people to be like, hey, fucking A, like, I only have to worry about 50% of my, like, I can spend 30% of my money according to this approach. Like, this is awesome. This is the budget that works for me. Like, I could go blow 30% of my money. Like, if I'm making a lot of money, right, maybe I don't want to be spending 30%, right? So for individuals who are making a lot of money, I wouldn't be so married to the percentages that we're using. And for somebody who's not making a lot of money, like, so for my daughter, the 50, 30, 20, it's more like 80,
doesn't really apply.
80, 20, 0, right? So 80%.
Right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
So 80% of her spending are all needs and 20% are for fun, and none of it is going to saving and retirement. But that's just because that's the stage in life she is. So the 50, 30, 20, like, again, it's a good starting point. But I think we started the podcast off with saying that I don't know that we really want to get tied into rules of thumbs or how much should I be spending on certain stuff. We want to iterate. We want to use the 50, 30, 20 to at least start with, okay, 50% goes to needs and 30% goes to wants. But man, like, what if I were to go 50, 20, 30, where I'm only spending 20% of my income and then increasing the amount that I'm saving for retirement or saving for this idea that I want to exert more control over my life. I want to maybe move to a less stressful career, et cetera, et cetera. So again, the 50, 30, 20 is just an opportunity for us to get started, but that doesn't mean that we want to just stick to those percentages every month. We want to iterate to something that makes perfect sense for us.
I love that. Well, and one of the things too, like one of the reasons that I got into personal finance so late in life and that was so frustrating for me is my friend Susan, one of my best friends, always was like, Sean, you need to read these personal finance books. And I would start reading the personal finance book. I would be reading and be like, screw you, man. Like, not to her, but to the book, because it's like, are you doing this? Are you investing like this? Because I was at that 80-20
Nice,
point. You know what I mean? Like, I was just like, dude, it wasn't that long ago that I've been dealing with that as well. It's like, I'm like sitting there reading and hearing people come on my God. Now I'm going to tell you all the secrets of the stock market. And I was like, what's the secret of paying bills when you don't have money,
Yeah.
Can you tell me that? And like at the same time, like, so it's like, I think one of the things that I like about the 50, 30, 20 is simply, it's the idea of allotting an amount. And you have a very clear, and again, maybe that amount's different, but yeah, you're right. Like if someone's making $1 million a year and they're spending 30% of that, that's a pretty hefty amount of money that they're blowing through every year.
I would love you spending.
Yeah, right. Dude, $300,000 a year. Like, let's go party. Like, that's probably partying
70% on wants. If I'm making $1 million, those percentages are definitely changing. No, I'm kidding.
Diving into the pay yourself first budget. Now, you had talked about this in an earlier episode where you were always talking about how one of the most important things was to save and invest first. So, and then, making sure that before, and I've had quite a few guests that came on that talked about this, and they're like, how they do it is like before it even touches their bank account, a chunk has been sent off to savings. And they're like, and then they don't even consider what's left because they just say like that money's gone, like, and then now I work with the rest of this because that savings is getting paid first.
Yeah. So again, the idea is where the 50, 30, 20 approach, the 20%, the last category was designed or dedicated to saving and setting aside money for either saving or investing in retirement or your long-term financial goals. And so what a lot of people will do is they'll say, okay, yeah, I'm going to go into the month and I'm going to have the 50, 30, 20 approach. And they get to the end of the month and they're like, fuck, like that Coachella was awesome, or Bottle Rock was killer. It was like a once in a lifetime opportunity and I couldn't pass it up, and blew into the 20% category. I don't have any money left to invest or set aside. They go to the next month and then something else happens the following month where like this once in a lifetime opportunity came up, or they were inspired to purchase a new TV at Costco. There was something on sale. There was some reason why they couldn't stick to the 50, 30, 20 budget. And they didn't have anything left for that last category at the end of the month. Because again, that last category is once I account for all the income that I've made and then subtract all the expenses that I've incurred, anything that I have left, I'm going to save and invest. So what usually ends up happening for a lot of people is that they just don't have as much self-control over the way that they spend money. And so there really isn't much left at the end of the month. So the pay yourself first approach is an approach that says, hey, listen, let's just fucking take the money out of your paycheck before it even hits your bank account, right? So let's take 10% or 20% or 30% of your income and let's like put it out of sight, out of mind. Let's put it in your retirement account. Let's put it into a separate savings account, but you're literally never going to see that money. It's just not available to you. You're going to pay yourself and set it aside. And then with whatever you have left, now we can start creating a budget. We can then say, some percentage of whatever you have left goes to your needs or your rent or your transportation, your utilities, food, entertainment, miscellaneous, one-time expenses, whatever. And we're just forgetting about the 20% that we paid ourselves first. And so it plays on really two things, right? So automation, usually those individuals who employ pay yourself first are doing things automatically. They are having their employers, allocate money to the 401k or an investment account. It's automated. And studies have shown that the more automated the process is, the more likely it is you're going to hit your financial goal. In fact, you have a 300% greater likelihood that you will achieve your financial goals if you automate this process. And then the second one is out of sight, out of mind, right? So if you just if you're not looking at it or you're not aware of it, it becomes easier not to spend. And so you're really playing on two, I don't know, psychological tricks may not be the right word, but two,
but it is. Strategies, two strategies
that really build it up for success. And my son is the perfect example, right? So my son doesn't give a fuck about budgeting. I open up his account and I look at what he's spending his money on, and it totally gives me so much anxiety. And so like I'm like, dude, what are you doing? I'm thinking to myself, dude, that's crazy. Like, how can you possibly be spending this much money on that. Like, that's crazy. So I was like, okay, you know what? I'm going to let him develop his own relationship with his money. And he should be spending his money how he wants to. However, I am going to make him pay himself first. And so I made him set up a retirement account. He's 18. So he's 19. He's got a IRA, which we'll talk about in another episode, but he just allocates automatically $400 every month to his IRA. And then he's got a car payment, and we've automated his car. So he's never going to be late on his car payment. Every month that payment is automated, and every month his deduction from his check to his IRA are automated. And then whatever else, it's just for him to figure out his own journey.
I love the idea of automating it, because the truth is, like, let's say I have my nephews and my daughter that were playing in my room today, and I was teaching them some homeschool for summer school stuff, just like our little activities. If I said, hey guys, here's a bowl of candy, and I set all that candy out in front of them, that shit's going to be gone in 5 minutes, like 100%. But if I say, hey guys, I got some candy, but do you want some candy for tomorrow? And they're like, yeah. Do you want some now? Yeah. I was like, all right, before I even hand this candy to you, I'm going to take 3 for each of you and hold it for tomorrow. And they don't even see it. It's not even in front of them. And then I set down the rest of the candy. They're going to eat the candy that was in front of them. Guaranteed. It's going to be gone. But what they didn't see, and what's stuck over here in my cabinet that they don't even know is there, is going to stay there. And then the next day they'll be like, dude, we got candy still? Yeah. Boom, you got it, And like, that's the beauty of automation, is because most of us are like those kids with the candy on the desk in front of us,
When it comes to, again, great analogy. When it comes to food,
food.
My doctor last year was like, hey, I want you to talk to a nutritionist. I'm like, the fuck is he going to tell me that or she is going to tell me that I don't already know? I'm not supposed to eat chips and fries and cake and ice cream. Like, I know that stuff already. And so I got on the call with this individual, and I was just like, I don't see how you're going to tell me anything I don't already know. But he's like, it was a he. And he's like, dude, just fucking don't buy it. Like, just don't bring it home. Like, don't have it in the cabinet. And I was like, oh wow, that's the perfect approach. If it's not available,
that's revolutionary.
I was like, if it's not in the cabinet, right? So, at 3 p.m, I got a ton of willpower, but 7, 8 o'clock, and I'm sitting around watching TV doing nothing. Dude, that ice cream in the freezer sounded real good. And so I just don't have the willpower to say no to it. However, if there is no ice cream in the freezer, it becomes much harder for me to slip up. And so it's the same, it's depriving yourself of a resource so that you can just make better decisions. And it's...
You're not alone on that food thing. Mom's got this. My mom and her brother cracked me up because they both, like, they raid the snacks at around 11, 12 p.m. and you don't see them. They shuffle out quietly. Like, we brought my mom these pistachio cookies from Vietnam that are, I'm flying back to the U.S. next month, and I'm going to send you some of these things. They are healthy, but they're like crack, dude. They're awesome. They're like really healthy pistachio cookies. And my mom, we bought her like 5 boxes of these things. And I never saw her eating one. And then suddenly we went up one day and I was like, hey, you got any more of those pistachio cookies? She's like, oh no, they're gone. And I was like, when did you eat them, man? When did you do it? And she was like, middle of the night. I heard her shuffling when we were staying at her house. I heard these feet shuffling out into the kitchen and then shuffling back. And like, she was taking a handful of pistachio cookies every trip.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
we have cookies at home. And I'm always the one eating it. And at some point, my wife will like open it up to grab one, and she'll be like, where the fuck did all the cookies go? And I'm like, goddamn Luke, man, I tell you. That kid. But no, it's me like waking up in the middle, not waking up in the middle of the night, but like going into the kitchen like late in the evening.
If it's not there, man, if you can plan ahead and you set that money aside, you set that food aside, it's much easier to do. Well, I want to keep moving. Go ahead.
Before we move on, I just want to I just want to reiterating. We are iterating. Again, the pay yourself first is an approach that's good for people who, they're not really trying to identify where they can pull money out of certain categories to hit very specific goals, right? So if you're highly in debt or if you have really extreme financial goals, paying yourself first is a decent strategy. But again, let's say that we come to the conclusion that, hey, we should be setting aside 15% of our income to our retirement. So the paying ourselves first, some of us might be able to allocate 15% of our income to our retirement. We're totally fine. We're good. We're moving on our merry way, right? So the pay yourself first isn't, again, what I guess the point I'm trying to make is it's not good if we have specific goals, because if we do have specific goals, we're going to want to iterate to, man, I just set aside 15%, but I went through the month and it was pretty easy. Like I covered all my bills. I went out, I had a decent amount of time. So the idea is, again, if you can get away with setting aside 15% and it felt okay, then why not try to do 16 or 17% of your income the following month, right? So again, we want to iterate to like things that work best for us. And so paying ourselves first isn't the right approach if we're really trying to maximize the amount that we're allocating to savings and retirement and aggressively paying off debt. I think we could be more focused on zero-based or 50-30-20 if we really have extreme goals or reasons for saving and paying off debt. We probably want to use one of those other approaches.
I love that. Well, and the one is, it seems to be kind of an interesting one that I've heard about a couple times, the anti-budget. Now, what I had heard about it is it's kind of like you decide how much to save each month and then just forget it, and the rest you spend freely. But that sounds terrifyingly dangerous to some individuals.
Yeah, so the paying yourself first, we're not suggesting that you just set up automation, you're allocating 15% or 20% or whatever it is to your savings, and then you're off and running and you're doing nothing. The paying yourself first also has an element where we do want to track our expenses month to month and identify areas for improvement, right? But the anti-budget is like, yeah, fuck it. I'm putting 15% away, and I don't really care what I do with the rest. And that's what my son is literally doing the anti-budget. Yeah,
that's 100%.
It's just like, screw
anti-budget,
like,
right there.
Don't even budget. But as long as you are like taking care of that major priority, the rest of it is fine. And again, if we have my son's young, and he doesn't have any credit card debt. He doesn't have the crazy student loans. And so like it's like if he wants to spend the remainder of his money on whatever he wants, like it's his choice. It's the anti-budget.
Yeah.
But again, it is not just like blindly spending every dollar that you have. It is still employing some approach where you are setting a priority and making sure that your money goes to that one specific priority.
Makes a lot of sense. Well, talk to me next about the envelope system. I have heard about people using this like for, what was it? There were some people that were, I don't know, Dave Ramsey's group, but people were talking about, it's essentially you're assigning cash to spending categories. And then, but like some people were literally putting cash in envelopes, and that's what they had for that week. And, what is the envelope
system? It started a while back, before electronic spending was popular. So like we have access to our accounts, and we were using our debit cards a certain way. And it could be the case that we're using our debit cards and we go to the store not realizing how much money we actually have available to us. And so we swipe our card, we buy something for, I don't know, $50, but we only had $30 in our account, right? So the banks were levying these really expensive overdraft fees. They're like, hey, you just tried to buy something for 50 and you only had 30 in your account. So we didn't let you buy it, and we're taking $20 from you as a result of like mindlessly using your debit card. So the envelope approach came about from people who are like, okay, well, fuck it, I'm not going to be paying those fees anymore. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put cash into an envelope, and I'm just going to write, food on the envelope or rent, and I'm going to set it aside. And so every time I go to pay rent, I'm just going to pull my cash out of the envelope. Or anytime I go to the store, I'm just going to pull my cash out of the envelope. Or maybe I'm going on vacation, and so I've got like a coffee jar in my kitchen counter, and I'm just going to stuff cash into that coffee jar. And then when I go on vacation, that's where I'm going to be spending my, and if I don't have money in the jar, I'm not spending it on vacation. So the envelope system is corralling our money, and it's saying, look, this specific chunk of cash is going to only be used for one activity. And once the cash is up, you're not doing that activity anymore. I'm not doing that activity anymore. So the envelope approach really started from like physical envelopes, but it's ballooned to like, I use the envelope approach in my own management of my money, right? So I don't use physical envelopes, but I have different accounts for different purposes. And I put money into each one of those accounts. And it's just like, my daughter's college education is one of those accounts where I'm putting money in. And the only thing that I spend with that account is for my daughter's college experience. And so, if I don't have anything in the account, unfortunately, she's not going to be able to eat, or she has to drop out of college. So I'm constantly putting money in, but it makes it really easy for me to manage that aspect of our life. It's just like, I know how much I need to put into that envelope every month, and I know how much is being taken out. And so it works for us electronically.
And it works. It seems, to me, it makes a lot of sense that it would work for people who tend to overspend, and also for people who need like visual limits. Like, this is the limit of this account, or this is the limit of what you can spend this week. Because some people need those hard stops.
It helps, right? It's just another. Again, like I don't care who you are. You probably have issues with food, right? Or alcohol, or, anything that you ingest, and spending money is sort of the same thing. Like, we can all be really good at managing our money, but we have our weaknesses. And the envelope approach is, again, it's just a different approach to making a system that works for some people. And this idea that you have visual indications of how much you actually have left related to certain types of spending helps you make decisions in the moment, right? So remember, we were saying, I think last week, to fucking remove yourself from the situation for 24 hours or 48 hours, right? That is one approach to making better spending decisions. But like this visual cue that says, hey, I've only got $100 left in the envelope for entertainment. I need to be conscious of like, how am I going to spend that $100 on? Like, am I going to be going, do I want to go to a second show, or do I want to go to only one show and have a lot of drinks at the bar while I'm enjoying the show? It's like, it just makes us more intentional in the way that we're spending our money.
I love that. Well, and that's a huge thing. And that ties into like the last budget that we're going to talk about, the intentionality in that being with the values-based budgeting. Because this is like the intention.
One last thing on the envelope system. There are some great apps available to us where they will take all of your different spending sources. So all you can, I don't know what the right, you can use an app as sort of like a clearinghouse for all your different types of credit cards. And the app will then
Oh, yeah.
summarize, okay, like you said you only wanted to spend 200 this week on food. And based on our analysis of what you're spending your money on with your Amex card and your Capital One card and your debit card, looks like you've spent about $180. So you only got 20 left for food, right? So there are really powerful apps that we could use that will allow us to employ the envelope approach, right, in a very seamless way. So just wanted to throw that out.
That's awesome.
It's a really it's a
it's
really
huge,
cool
man.
school.
And it's like it is because it's like the technology is up to a level to like allow us to, still use the new tech, because not everyone's doing cash all the time anymore, but you also be able to put these safeguards in place,
Yeah.
Well, talk to me about the values-based budgeting around your core values like freedom, health, family, etc. I've heard this being something that you track. You're tracking if your spending aligns with your values. Is that right? Or I'm not fully getting it.
I think that's totally right. I think it might be. They're all the same. Everything. It's all the same. It's just different. It's how you want to think about it, how you want to package it, how you want to group it together. And so again, that we were talking about the 50-30-20 approach, where 50 was for needs and 30 was for wants. The value-based budgeting is just, okay, we're going to assign different percentages to things that we place priorities or things that are valuable to us. And, for me, again, going out and having fun, like going to dinner or going to shows, to me, that's like something that provides a lot of value to me. So I'm just going to take a higher percentage of my spending is going to be related to that category. And then I'm going to allocate very little money, I don't know, to like buying books. I fucking hate reading. And so like, if I'm walking through a store and I see a book, this never happens, but if I was walking through a store and I saw a book that I had to have, right? Yeah, Psychology of Money. There you go. The one book. I would need to stop myself and be like, okay, listen, like looks interesting, but is that consistent with my values? Because I want to make sure that my spending is consistent with what I want out of life. And so, it looks like a good book.
Yeah.
But man, I think I would enjoy a couple of drinks at the Fillmore watching a good show more than reading that book. So I think I'm going to pass on the book and say yes to the drinks at the show at the Fillmore.
Right. That's so true. Because like for me, I was talking to someone and like, they're like, dude, if you had $1 million, what would you like to buy? And I was like, all right, well, here are some of the things that I would like to have. And there's a reason for it. One of them, there's like all these old houses in Japan that are selling for like 40 to 80K. Like they're out in the countryside, old people, got old, retired, and the kids wanted them to move in with the parents. And so now they got these old houses out there and they're like beautiful, pristine nature in Japan. And they're just all beautiful. And I was like, and they're like, well, what would you do with that? And I was like, I'd just get away with my family, man. I'd go out there, hang out in nature, do some gardening and just chill. Because to me, that's valuable, man. Like, go and learn Japanese swordsmanship, or like making swords or something out there with my daughter. Like that'd be rad. I saw this one guy, he's like, I could think it's down in like southwestern Japan. And you go and he's like, learn how to make Japanese knives in the traditional way. And I was like, that'd be rad, but like, my family, we're big on like activities. So when we're going back to the US this summer with my daughter, and my wife and I were talking about, well, what are some of the things that we want to do? And I was like, you know what? we're going to be down near San Diego. San Diego Zoo is high on my list because that was some of the best experiences I had as a kid. We're going to San Diego Zoo. Do I want to buy my daughter the new Nintendo Switch 2? No, man. I don't want to buy that. Do I want to buy a new tablet for my kid? Oh, no way. But I do want to go to the zoo. I do want to go to the Wild Animal Park. I'd love to go to Magic Mountain again. Haven't been there in forever. But these are experiences that align with my values. And like entertainment maybe could morph into, family time or something like that. You just redefine it for what's important to you.
Yeah, that's a concept that starts in corporate America. It's capital rationing, right? If you had $1 million to go do whatever you wanted to do with, like, man, there's so much you could do, but who the fuck has that? And so we need to pick and choose what it is we're going to be spending our money on. We got to create a system that aligns our spending with our priorities, right? We have to. Companies just don't blindly pursue different opportunities. Every opportunity a company has opportunity cost, right? So you can open up a new flagship location on the West Coast, but that's just taking away what you're already doing on the East Coast. And so what's more important to the company, having a new location in California or making their existing location in New York so much better? Be great to do both, but the companies just like us have a limited amount of resources available to it. So there needs to be, some thought behind how you approach your spending and your investing. And so if it works for companies, right? If these companies are using these tools to become hugely valuable and compete in the open market, like why isn't it the case that we can take those concepts and apply them to our personal lives and like really carve out a life that makes sense for us? And I think it's what we were saying last week where, happiness comes from having control. And so we're not necessarily saying that spending money is going to make you happy, but if you just look at your money as a way for you to implement control over your life, maybe that will make you happy.
Right. There was I have a friend, and I follow her on Facebook, and we were in college together, and she just recently posted her new house for her and her 3 horses, and I was just like, and and her budget. I mean, she's a horse person. If she grew up riding, she is a horse person. But like for me, like, dude, that's not a priority for me. That's not one of my core values. Is like, I don't want to be like, dude, I love horses. I would love to have that FU money and be like, this is my horse farm. Like, man, Michael Bay type money. Or what was it? The guy who did what do you call it? Yellowstone TV show. The director of that, like, no, Yellowstone director. I can't even remember his name, but the guy went. Tyler Sheridan. Dude went and bought the best horse ranch in the U.S. Like, well, why? Because he loved horses and he was doing the whole cowboy thing, and he made so much money that he's like, well, I'm just going to buy the 6666 ranch down in Texas. And now he's got the best horse ranch in the world. I'd love to have that type of money, but that's not one of my priorities. You know what I mean? Like, we all have our different, but I can't look at her and go, why would you buy a horse? Why do you want a horse? That's such a bad investment. Like, horse people will tell you horses are a horrible investment, but like, that's something that's important to her. That falls into her wants category. And like, as long as she's budgeting for the rest of her stuff, that's where she's at, and it's personal.
One of my closest friends that I went to college with passed away, and literally on his deathbed, I was like, dude, I will always make myself available to your wife and kids. Like, anytime they need anything, specifically questions related to money, I'll always be there for them. Like, I'll answer every question. I'll reach out to them. And so for the last, 4 or 5 months, he passed away in January. And so I've been having conversations with his family. And one of the conversations that has come up was the surviving spouse, his wife, wants to pay off their mortgage, right? So they have a beautiful house in San Jose, and she's got a lot of, like, unfortunately, she has a lot of insurance proceeds from his death. And she's like, "Look, I want to pay off my house. I want to get rid of the mortgage." And financially, that isn't the right decision for her to make because their interest rate on the loan is really low. And so I was telling her, "Look, you have $1 million. You can take that $1 million, you can put it in the stock market, and we can pick some pretty conservative investments, and you can maybe make 6%. So you can make $60,000 a year, and with that 60,000, you can make your house payment every month. You'll be totally fine, and you'll end the month with a
Wow.
little bit more money." And her response to me was like, "Yeah, but like, I'm gonna have a house payment, and I don't want a fucking house payment because I just lost my husband, and it's like really stressful, and so I just don't really want a house payment." To me, for her, she would rather just like pay the loan off, even though it didn't make sense financially, like from the books. And so we were like, "Okay, listen, if that really is what you want most out of life at the moment, then you should do that. Even though it's not
Yeah.
by the book, it's not the right decision, but according to like what it is that you want most out of life, which is peace of mind and not having a house payment, then I think it makes sense to do that." It's like
Yeah.
really putting your money where your mouth is, spending based on value as opposed to, you know, mindlessly doing things.
I love that. Well, as we start to wrap things up, we've kind of finished all these awesome budgets. There was something that you had in the notes that I just wanted to like pull you back on and have you
Okay.
comment about. Like, you had three awesome final tips, but there was one that really rang out. First, you had to start small, then review monthly. But the one that rang out to me was this one: increase income where possible, reduce costs where controllable. Like, fundamental idea was like to kind of keep income, make more money, and then, cut where you can and then put the rest in savings.
Yeah, is there anything that we need to add to that? I think you did.
I
I
don't even
think that
know. I
was
don't know,
awesome.
man.
I want to say that's the mic drop moment. I definitely have something I want to end with too, but but
Tell me,
um
tell me,
but
tell
yeah,
me.
like, again, with the budgeting, I want to say that our first episode on budgeting, we started with the budget really has to be three pronged, right? It really is income,
Yep.
spending, and then what's left over. And so we've been really focused on
Mm-hmm.
the spending part. But again, we don't want to lose sight of the fact that
Yep.
we also always need to be identifying areas of improvement in terms of like, can we make more money? I was watching a one of your podcasts with some, I don't remember who it was, but the kid was suggesting that like side hustles are, the right way to go, and you should have your 9 to 5, and then you could be side hustling, doing something to make more money. And according to him, that was like the home run thing to do, is a side hustle that's separate from your 9 to 5. And I remember listening to that, and I was like, yeah, that's totally wrong advice, according to me anyway. Like, I personally think the more that you invest in your 9 to 5, the more your 9 to 5 is going to lead to higher amounts of annual income. And so, yeah, maybe in the immediate term, you're not going to get anything out of working overtime. Maybe your bonus isn't going to be quite as much, or it's not going to make a whole lot of financial sense because you killed yourself all year. But the thought is that you really are investing in your career, and so your immediate return isn't going to be huge. But man, if you can progress from the manager to the partner level, being a partner, you're going to make tons more money. And so, like, again,
Yeah.
who's right, who's wrong? We're both right and we're both wrong to some extent. But the idea is that we
Right.
do want to make sure that when we're thinking about budgeting, it's not just about controlling costs. It has to also be about where's the income, what are your sources of income, and what things can you be doing to increase your income. So yeah, that's a good,
Yeah,
but I
I
I
love that.
sort of wanted to pull just for a second. I'm going to do this as quickly as I can. I want to just like summarize like stage of life or what your financial situation looks like, and then just based on the general, information available to us, what budgeting approach makes the most sense for you or what you should consider starting with. So if you're a college student, I would definitely go with the 50-30-20 approach or the envelope approach. If you're
Yeah.
low income, if you're a low
Okay.
income household, right, struggling to make ends meet, I think you want to probably start with the zero based or envelope. If you're high end, I think you want
Mm,
to do like pay yourself first or the zero based budgeting. Like high income individuals tend to be detail oriented. So maybe it makes sense to do a zero based budgeting. But if you are making a lot of money, maybe the pay yourself first makes sense for you. If you're a family with kids and you're struggling to make ends meet, I would pick any one of those approaches and I would just try to incrementally every month find areas for improvement. So it's if you're a family,
mm,
you just have to there is no one size fits all. You really need to go with what makes the most sense, but you want to make sure you iterate into what works best for you over time. And I will just say that in general, if you are a family, the zero-based budgeting probably does make the most sense to start with, even though it is more complicated. And then finally, if you're swimming in debt, okay, the zero-based approach is definitely going to be your way to go, or the envelope approach, where you really want to identify areas of improvement. You want to take money out of the food the going out for food category and putting it into the debt
yeah.
payoff category. So anyway, I thought that would be something that made sense, is to just sort of tie it all together to summarize what we've been talking about.
Well, it does tie it together, man. And I think that budgeting is a complicated thing that doesn't have to be. And I think that if you can focus on the starting small and saying, well, where the hell can I start? And then like you said, like looking at where you're at in your stage of life, it makes it a
Yeah.
lot freaking easier.
Yeah.
So
And it's turning, last thing is
sweet,
just
man.
turning stuff into habits, right? You can just identify that one category, pay real close attention to it for 4 or 5 months, and then develop like a system or habits, like where you're going out to dinner once a week and you're spending the rest making dinners at home, right? After you like develop that
Yep.
habit, you don't really have to be paying too much attention to that category of your budget. So maybe you're done budgeting when it comes to
Yep.
food. And so it's just like you're trying to develop habits to make this automated so that we're not budgeting for the rest of our lives.